If you think you know what happens inside the walls of maximum security prisons, you have no idea what's coming. Before we step into one of the most shocking prison incidents in American history, hit that subscribe button, smash the like, and drop a comment telling me which prison case terrifies you the most. Trust me, you're going to need to see how this one ends. August 14, 2009. United States Penitentiary, Atwater, California. The sun beat down mercilessly on the concrete and razor wire that surrounded one of America's most secure federal prisons. Inside those walls, 4,000 inmates lived in a world governed by violence, hierarchy, and survival. Among them was a man named Jose Garcia, a former cartel enforcer serving 3 consecutive life sentences for crimes so brutal that even hardened corrections officers struggled to read his case file. Garcia had been at Atwater for 6 years. He kept to himself, followed the rules, and seemed to have accepted his fate. But on that scorching August morning, something changed. During breakfast in the main dining hall, Garcia stood up from his table, walked calmly across the room, and stabbed another inmate 17 times with a sharpened piece of metal he had somehow smuggled past multiple security checkpoints. The victim was Marcus Webb, a 42-year-old former gang leader who had been in protective custody for testifying against his former associates. Webb had requested to be kept separated from the general population. But budget cuts and overcrowding had forced the prison administration to integrate him back into the main compound 3 weeks earlier. Corrections officers had assured him he would be safe. They were wrong. Webb died before the guards could even reach him. Garcia dropped the weapon, raised his hands, and surrendered without resistance. Blood pooled across the cafeteria floor as hundreds of inmates watched in complete silence. This was not a fight. This was an execution, carried out in front of witnesses, cameras, and armed guards by a man who knew exactly what he was doing. The investigation began immediately. Warden Thomas Kellerman ordered a complete lockdown of the facility. Every cell was searched. Every inmate was questioned. Investigators from the FBI's Civil Rights Division arrived within hours. Because a murder inside a federal prison raised questions that went far beyond a simple inmate dispute. How had Garcia obtained the weapon? How had he known Webb would be in that specific location at that specific time? And most disturbing of all, why had he been willing to guarantee himself decades in solitary confinement for killing a man he claimed never to have met? Special Agent Victoria Chen led the investigation. She had spent 15 years working organized crime cases and knew that prison murders were rarely spontaneous. Someone had ordered the hit, someone had provided the weapon, someone inside the prison was facilitating contract killings. And if that was true, the entire security system at Atwater had been compromised. Chen started with Garcia. In the interrogation room, he sat motionless, his eyes flat and emotionless. When asked why he killed Webb, Garcia simply smiled and said because some debts have to be paid. Chen pressed him. What debt? Who ordered it? How much was he paid? Garcia refused to answer. He knew the system. He knew that adding another murder to 3 life sentences meant nothing. He had nothing to lose and nothing to gain by cooperating. The interview ended with Garcia being led back to solitary confinement, where he would spend the next 23 hours a day alone in a concrete cell. But Chen was not finished. She began pulling phone records, visitation logs, and financial transactions for every person who had contact with Garcia over the past 6 months. What she found was a pattern so disturbing it threatened to expose corruption that reached far beyond a single prison. Garcia had received regular visits from his sister Maria, a woman with no criminal record who worked as a dental hygienist in Fresno. The visits seemed normal. Routine family contact that prisons encouraged to maintain inmate mental health. But when Chen reviewed the recorded conversations. She noticed something odd. Maria and Garcia spoke almost entirely in coded language, discussing family recipes and car repairs in ways that made no logical sense. Chen brought in a linguistics expert from the Bureau. After 3 days of analysis, the expert confirmed what Chen suspected. The conversations were encrypted communication. Maria was acting as a courier, receiving instructions from someone outside the prison and relaying them to Garcia during their visits. The hit on Marcus Webb had been planned for weeks, maybe months, and the orders had come from the outside. Chen obtained a warrant to search Maria's home. What they found in her bedroom closet made every agent on the scene go silent. Hidden inside a showbox beneath old sweaters were $47,000 in cash bundled in neat stacks, along with a burner phone that contained text messages coordinating not just Webb's murder but 3 other contract killings inside federal prisons across the country. The messages referenced names, locations, and payment schedules. They discussed corrections officers who could be bribed, blind spots in camera coverage, and methods for smuggling weapons past metal detectors. This was not a single murder. This was an organized criminal enterprise operating inside America's most secure prisons, using inmates as hired killers and corrupting the very guards meant to keep them contained. Chen traced the burner phone's contacts. Most were disconnected or led to dead ends, but one number, used repeatedly in the weeks before Webb's murder, was still active. Chen's team tracked it to a location in Los Angeles, a luxury apartment in a high-rise building overlooking the city. When agents raided the apartment, they found it empty. But on the kitchen counter, someone had left a single item: a corrections officer's badge from United States Penitentiary Atwater, belonging to Officer Raymond Nash, a 12-year veteran of the prison system with a spotless record and a reputation for integrity. Nash had reported his badge stolen 3 weeks earlier, but when Chen pulled his financial records, she discovered deposits totaling over $200,000 in the past 18 months. All from offshore accounts that could not be traced. The question that haunted Chen became impossible to ignore. How many other officers were involved? How deep did the corruption go? And if a man like Nash, trusted and respected, could be bought, who inside those walls could be trusted at all? Raymond Nash sat across from Special Agent Victoria Chen in an interrogation room that felt smaller with each passing minute. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across his face. He was 43 years old, married with 2 daughters in college, and according to every supervisor he had ever worked for, he was one of the best corrections officers at Atwater. But the offshore deposits told a different story. Chen laid out bank statements across the metal table, $217,000 over 18 months. Deposits that came like clockwork, always in amounts just below the federal reporting threshold. Nash stared at the papers, his jaw clenched tight, sweat forming on his forehead despite the cold air conditioning. "I want a lawyer," he finally said. Chen leaned back in her chair. "You can have one. But before you do, you should know that we've already identified 4 other officers receiving payments from the same accounts. We have Maria Garcia in custody, and she's talking. We have the burner phone with your number all over it. The only question left is whether you're the one running this operation or just another employee." Nash's face went pale. "I'm not running anything." "Then who is?" Chen asked, her voice sharp as a blade. Nash looked down at his hands. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, barely above a whisper, he spoke. "You have no idea what you're dealing with. If I talk, my family is dead." Chen felt ice run through her veins. This was bigger than she had imagined. "We can protect them. Witness protection, relocation, new identities. But you have to give me something." Nash shook his head slowly. You can't protect anyone from these people. They have reach everywhere. Inside prisons, outside prisons, in law enforcement. You think Atwater is the only facility they control. They're in a dozen prisons across 6 states. They move drugs, weapons, information. They arrange hits, intimidate witnesses, eliminate problems. And they do it all while we watch. Who are they? Chen demanded. Nash looked up, his eyes filled with something between fear and resignation. The syndicate. That's what they call themselves. Started about 5 years ago when 3 major prison gangs decided cooperation was more profitable than war. Mexican Mafia, Aryan Brotherhood, and a crew out of Chicago. They pooled resources, shared intelligence, and started recruiting guards who needed money or had debts or secrets worth exploiting. Chen processed this information. A multi-ethnic criminal alliance operating inside the prison system was almost unheard of. These groups had been enemies for decades. How did they recruit you? Nash's voice cracked. My daughter needed surgery. Insurance wouldn't cover it. Experimental treatment for a rare condition. I was looking at $400,000 in medical bills. They knew. Someone approached me, offered to pay for everything, said all I had to do was look the other way a few times. Let certain packages get through. Make sure cameras had blind spots during specific times. It seemed harmless at first. And then they owned you, Chen said. Nash nodded. Once you take the first payment, you're in forever. They have evidence of everything. Video, recordings, documents. If you try to leave, they destroy you and everyone you love. Chen leaned forward. Marcus Webb, why was he killed? Webb was going to testify in a federal case against a cartel leader. The leader is serving time at Lompoc, but he still runs operations outside. Webb's testimony would have connected him to murders in Texas and Arizona. The syndicate was paid $500,000 to eliminate Webb before trial. Garcia was the triggerman, but the order came from the top. Who's at the top? Chen asked. Nash hesitated, then pulled out his phone. He scrolled through photos until he found one, then slid the device across the table. The image showed a man in his 50s, well-dressed, standing outside what looked like a corporate office building. He had gray hair, expensive glasses, and the confident smile of someone who had never known consequence. His name is Michael Breslin, Nash said. He's a private prison consultant. Works with state and federal facilities on security assessments and operational efficiency. He has access to every prison in the system, knows every weakness, every corrupt official, every inmate with skills they need. He's been building the syndicate for years, and nobody suspects him because he's the guy they call to fix problems. Chen photographed the image with her own phone and immediately sent it to her team. Where can we find him? Good luck, Nash said bitterly. Breslin moves around constantly. He's got homes in 4 states, offices in a dozen cities. He's always surrounded by security, always has alibis. And he's smart enough to keep 3 layers of people between himself and any actual crime. Chen stood up. You're going to help us. You're going to wear a wire, gather evidence, and testify. In exchange, we protect your family and reduce your sentence. Nash looked terrified but nodded slowly. If I do this, you need to move them today. Right now. Because the moment the syndicate knows I'm talking, the clock starts. Chen made the call. Within 2 hours, Nash's wife and daughters were on their way to a secure federal facility under armed escort. Nash himself was fitted with a recording device so sophisticated it was undetectable, even with a full body scan. The plan was simple. Nash would return to work at Atwater, continue his normal duties, and document everything. He would record conversations with other corrupt officers, identify syndicate operatives among the inmate population, and gather evidence of ongoing criminal operations. It was dangerous, possibly suicidal. But it was the only way to bring down an organization that had infected the entire prison system. 3 days later, Nash returned to Atwater. The other officers greeted him normally, unaware that every word they spoke was being recorded. He identified 2 other guards on the syndicate payroll, both of whom discussed upcoming contraband deliveries scheduled for the following week. The recordings were damning, explicit admissions of crimes that would put them away for decades. But on the 4th day, something went wrong. Nash was called to a meeting in a storage room on the prison's east wing. When he arrived, 3 men were waiting. One was Officer Dennis Kramer, a 20-year veteran Nash had known since his first day on the job. The other 2 were inmates Nash recognized as high-ranking members of the Mexican mafia. Kramer's face was cold, emotionless. "We need to talk about your conversation with the FBI." Nash's blood turned to ice. His hand instinctively moved toward the panic button hidden in his belt, but before he could press it, one of the inmates moved behind him, pressing something sharp against his back. "Don't," Kramer said quietly. "Just listen." Nash's mind raced. How did they know? The wire was undetectable. His family was in protective custody. Everything had been planned perfectly. Kramer pulled out a tablet and turned it toward Nash. On the screen was security footage from the FBI field office, showing Nash entering the building 3 days earlier. Timestamp, dated. "Undeniable. Breslin has people everywhere," Kramer said. "Inside the bureau, inside local police, inside witness protection. Did you really think you could hide?" Nash felt his legs weaken. "My family is safe for now," Kramer said. "Breslin wants to give you a choice. You can keep working with the FBI, gather your evidence, testify at trial. And when this is all over, your wife and daughters will have a terrible accident. Car crash. House fire. Something tragic and unavoidable." Nash's voice cracked. Or you tell the FBI the lead was bad. You say you were mistaken about the syndicate's reach. You go back to your normal life, keep taking payments, and your family stays alive. You have until tomorrow morning to decide." The inmates stepped back. Kramer walked to the door, then turned. "Choose wisely, Raymond, because this is the only choice you'll ever get." Nash stood alone in the storage room, the wire still recording, his world collapsing around him. He had thought he was helping bring down a criminal empire. Instead, he had just learned that the empire was so vast, so deeply embedded in every institution meant to stop it, that there might be no way to fight it at all. And somewhere in the facility, Jose Garcia sat in his cell, smiling because he knew exactly what was happening. The system was broken. The syndicate controlled it. And anyone foolish enough to challenge that reality would learn the same lesson Marcus Webb had learned. Some debts can never be paid. Some wars can never be won. Raymond Nash did not sleep that night. He sat in his living room with the lights off, staring at his phone, knowing that whatever choice he made would define the rest of his life, and possibly end the lives of everyone he loved. The wire was still hidden beneath his shirt, still recording, still transmitting every sound to the FBI monitoring station 3 miles away. Special Agent Victoria Chen had heard everything. The moment Nash left Atwater that evening, a tactical team surrounded his house. Chen sat across from him now, her face grim but determined. "We can still protect them," she said. "We move your family tonight. New names, new location, complete isolation, until this is over." Nash laughed bitterly. "You heard Kramer. Breslin has people inside witness protection. How am I supposed to trust a system that's already compromised. Chen leaned forward. Because the alternative is living under their control forever. You think they'll just let you walk away if you cooperate. They'll own you until the day you die, and the moment you're no longer useful, they'll eliminate you anyway. This is your only chance. Nash knew she was right. He had seen what happened to people who tried to leave the syndicate. Bodies found in empty cells. Suicides that were anything but. Officers who retired and died in suspicious accidents months later. There was no escape except through the law, and even that felt like a gamble with impossible odds. "What do you need from me?" he finally asked. Chen pulled out a file. "Michael Breslin is scheduled to visit Atwater in 2 days for a routine security assessment. We need you to get him on record discussing the syndicate. 1 conversation, 1 admission, and we have enough to bring down the entire operation." Nash shook his head. "Breslin never talks business in person. He's too smart for that." "Then we make him," Chen said. "We create a crisis. Something that forces him to respond directly." Over the next 48 hours, Chen's team orchestrated the most elaborate sting operation in the Bureau's history. They created a fake inmate, a federal informant named Carlos Mendez, who would be transferred into Atwater with a fabricated story that he was cooperating with authorities against the syndicate. The information was leaked through channels they knew were compromised, ensuring it would reach Breslin within hours. The plan was simple but dangerous. Breslin would hear about Mendez, recognize him as a threat, and order his elimination, but to coordinate the hit quickly, he would have to communicate directly with operatives inside the prison. Nash would be positioned to intercept those communications and, if possible, confront Breslin face to face. Carlos Mendez arrived at Atwater on schedule. He was placed in general population, exactly where he would be most vulnerable. Nash watched from the command center as inmates began circling Mendez like sharks sensing blood. Within 6 hours, Officer Dennis Kramer approached Nash with new instructions. "Breslin wants Mendez dead before tomorrow morning," Kramer said. "He's already arranged the hitter. You make sure camera 12 stays offline during dinner shift." Nash nodded, his heart pounding. "Understood." But camera 12 did not go offline. Instead, it captured everything in high definition as 2 inmates approached Mendez during dinner. They moved with clear intent, hands concealed, closing in for the kill. But before they could strike, 50 FBI agents stormed the facility. The lockdown was immediate and total. Every inmate was secured. Every officer was detained for questioning. And in the chaos, Michael Breslin made his first and final mistake. He called Dennis Kramer's cell phone directly, bypassing all the usual intermediaries, desperate to know what had gone wrong. Kramer's phone was already in FBI custody. Chen answered. "Mr. Breslin," she said calmly. "We need to talk." There was a long silence, then the line went dead. But it was too late. The call had been traced to a hotel in Phoenix, Arizona. Federal agents arrived within 20 minutes and found Breslin in his suite, surrounded by laptops, encrypted phones, and financial records documenting every transaction the syndicate had made over 5 years. He was arrested without incident, no dramatic confrontation, no violent resistance, just a middle-aged man in an expensive suit, realizing that his empire had finally collapsed. The investigation that followed was staggering in scope. 47 corrections officers were arrested across 11 federal prisons. 23 inmates were charged with murder for hire, racketeering, and conspiracy. Financial records revealed that the syndicate had moved over $30 million through the prison system, funding drug operations, weapons trafficking, and contract killings that extended far beyond prison walls. Raymond Nash testified at trial. His family was relocated under new identities to a location even Chen did not know. His testimony helped convict Breslin and 17 co-conspirators, each receiving sentences ranging from 20 years to life without parole. Jose Garcia, the man who had killed Marcus Webb, was offered a deal to testify against the syndicate's leadership. He refused. He would spend the rest of his life in solitary confinement at ADX Florence, the same supermax facility that now housed Eric Rudolph and other notorious criminals. Garcia had chosen loyalty to a criminal organization over any chance at reduced punishment, a decision that prison psychologists struggled to understand. But the victory felt incomplete. During the trials, evidence emerged that the syndicate had been larger than anyone imagined. Breslin had operatives in state prisons, county jails, even juvenile detention facilities. Some were never identified. Some escaped prosecution due to lack of evidence, and some simply disappeared, vanishing into the general population of America's vast correctional system. 6 months after Breslin's conviction, Chen received an anonymous letter at her office. No return address, no signature, just a single sentence typed on plain paper. You cut off one head, but the body is still alive. Chen immediately launched an investigation, but the letter yielded no forensic evidence. No fingerprints, no DNA, no digital trail. It could have been a prank, a bitter threat from a convicted criminal, or something far more disturbing. 3 weeks later, a corrections officer at a federal prison in Texas was found dead in his home, apparent suicide. But when investigators reviewed his finances, they found the same pattern of offshore deposits that had appeared in Raymond Nash's accounts. Officer had been scheduled to testify in an ongoing corruption case. Chen knew what it meant. The syndicate had not died with Breslin's arrest. It had simply adapted, reorganized, and continued operating under new leadership. The prison system was too vast, too underfunded, too reliant on officers who could be exploited. And as long as those vulnerabilities existed, criminal organizations would find ways to weaponize them. Raymond Nash heard about the Texas officer's death on the news. He was living under a new name in a new city, working a quiet job far from anything related to law enforcement. His daughters were finishing college. His wife had started to feel safe again. But that news report brought all the fear rushing back. He picked up a burner phone he had kept hidden for emergencies and called the only number programmed into it. Chen answered on the first ring. "It's happening again," Nash said. "I know," Chen replied. "We're investigating." "Will it ever end?" he asked. Chen was silent for a long moment. Then, with a weariness that came from years of fighting battles that never seemed to conclude, she gave him the only honest answer she had. "I don't know." Nash hung up and destroyed the phone. He returned to his family, to the life he had built from the ruins of his old one, and tried to believe that the distance between him and that world was enough to keep them safe. But somewhere in America's prison system, in a facility where thousands of inmates live behind concrete and steel, a corrections officer was taking his first payment from an offshore account. A new recruit, a new weakness, a new link in a chain that seemed impossible to break. The syndicate was still out there. Smaller, perhaps. More careful, definitely. But alive and growing, feeding on the same corruption and desperation that had birthed it in the first place. And in a maximum security cell, a man convicted of murder sat quietly, knowing that the organization he had served would outlive him, outlive his captors, and continue thriving in the shadows of America's justice system. Because some systems are too broken to fix. Some wars are too embedded to win. And some monsters wear badges and speak the language of order while orchestrating chaos from within. If this story shook you, you're not ready for what comes next, hit that subscribe button, because the darkness we're about to explore goes deeper than you can imagine. The next case will make this one look like the beginning, and trust me, you won't want to miss it.